Welcome to Kiki's Talk Buffet. Let's talk it out. Ever notice how some connections just seem, well, effortless, while others feel like you're constantly pushing uphill?
Yeah, it's a common feeling, isn't it?
Right. So today we're diving into what really makes relationships tick, specifically trust. We've gathered some really, I think, insightful material.
Hmm.
It explores these powerful ideas
Oh,
of
yeah.
the emotional bank account and this whole philosophy of win-win thinking.
Two really foundational concepts.
Exactly. Think of this as maybe your shortcut to figuring out how to build stronger, more rewarding relationships everywhere. Work, home.
All areas, really.
We've looked at these excerpts and they really focus on how we interact, how we depend on each other, and we're pretty excited to kind of unpack the key takeaways with you.
What's great about these ideas, I find, is they give you a really practical way to look at the dynamics. What's actually happening in our interactions.
Right.
Like the emotional bank account, it takes something abstract like trust and makes it feel more
Hmm.
tangible, something you can work with.
Okay, yeah, let's dig into that one first. This emotional bank account. It's obviously not real money, so what is it? What's the core idea?
So at its heart, it really just represents the amount of trust, the feeling of security that exists between two people in any relationship.
Okay.
Think of it like a reserve of confidence you have in someone. When we do things like being polite, honest, kind, keeping our promises,
Mm-hmm.
those are deposits.
You're adding to the account.
Exactly. You're building up that safety, that trust. But when we're rude, disrespectful, maybe break our word. Those are withdrawals.
And they drain the account.
They drain it. They erode that trust. Slowly, sometimes quickly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense just intuitively. And the source material really hammers this home with that quote from Samuel Johnson.
Oh, yeah, the one about trust and honesty.
Without trust, there can be no friendship. Without honesty, there can be no trust. It just really lends, doesn't it? How basic this is.
It really does. And the text is quite clear that you can't really build these strong, interdependent relationships, where you rely on each other without first having a solid foundation yourself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like independence, personal integrity, strong
Yeah.
character. You need that baseline before you can effectively team up or partner with someone else.
Right, right. So it's not about finding some clever trick or technique.
No, not at all.
There's that story in the sources about the person at the seminar whose wife was always questioning him. That seemed like a really stark example of an overdrawn account.
Oh, the Oregon seminar attendee. Yes. That's such a vivid illustration. His wife constantly questioning his trips, his motives.
Because of past actions, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Past infidelity had created this huge deficit. The trust was just gone. So everything he did, even if it was totally innocent in the present, was seen through that lens of suspicion.
Wow. So it wasn't even about the now, it was the weight of the past withdrawals.
Precisely. The cumulative impact.
Yeah.
And it makes that point, doesn't it, that you often can't just smooth things over with words.
Yeah, the source says you can't just talk your way out of these deep issues. It comes back to your actual behavior.
It really does. Relationship problems often mirror our own patterns, our own actions. Trying to fix it by just focusing on what they need to change. Well, it rarely works if you're not looking inward too.
Hmm.
The text really emphasizes self-control, self-awareness.
Hmm.
Knowing yourself is kind of fundamental to having good relationships with others.
So all the charm in the world won't help if the account keeps getting drained by your actions. It's got to be real character.
That's the core message.
And I liked the goose and golden eggs thing. Can you unpack that a bit? How does that relate?
Yeah, that's a great analogy for balance. So the relationship itself is the goose.
Okay.
And the golden eggs are the positive outcomes, like good teamwork, open communication, feeling understood.
The good stuff you get from the relationship.
Right. But if you only focus on getting the eggs and you neglect the goose, you don't nurture the relationship itself eventually. The goose gets sick and the eggs stop coming.
Ah, so you have to invest in the relationship itself, not just expect the benefits.
Exactly. You need to care for the goose.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually make these deposits? The sources lay out 6 main ways. Let's start with the first one. Understanding the individual. Seems obvious, but there's more to it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Because what one person sees as a deposit, another might not. It's deeply personal.
How so?
Well, think about that story of the university professor and his teenage son. The dad kept trying to connect over academic stuff, his interests.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't landing. It wasn't a deposit for the son. It only clicked when the father took an interest in what the son valued, building that miniature Great Wall.
Right. He had to see it from the son's perspective.
Precisely. It's not just about being generically nice. It's about truly understanding what makes that specific person feel valued, understood, cared for. That's the real deposit.
That's a really subtle but important shift. It moves beyond the golden rule, doesn't it? Treat others as you want to be treated.
It does. The text introduces this idea of the platinum rule.
Which is...
Treat others how they want to be treated. It demands more empathy, more listening, really trying to get inside their world.
Okay, number 2 is paying attention to the little things. I guess we often brush these off, but they add up.
They add up significantly. Small kindnesses,
Mhm.
moments of real presence, those are deposits. But also, small slights, little bits of carelessness or disrespect, those are withdrawals. And sometimes the unintentional ones hurt the most.
Like the story of the dad and his 2 sons at the movies.
Exactly. The younger son falls asleep, dad puts his coat over him. A caring gesture, right?
Seems like it.
But the older son, who was awake and right there, felt completely overlooked. That small, instinctive act by the father was a withdrawal for the older son because it hit his need for attention, for feeling equally cared for.
Oof. Yeah, you can really feel that. It shows how even tiny actions can have a big emotional impact. Okay, third deposit. Keeping commitments. This feels pretty fundamental. Keep your promises.
It's huge for trust building. Every time you say you'll do something and you do it, bang, deposit. You're reliable.
And the reverse is true for breaking them.
Big time. Breaking promises, even small ones, chips away at that trust significantly. The text stresses, don't make promises casually.
Right.
And if you absolutely can't keep one, don't just ignore it. Explain why. Try to get released from the promise. That honesty itself can sometimes mitigate the withdrawal.
Especially with kids, I imagine. Setting that example early.
Crucial with kids. They learn about reliability from you.
Okay, fourth way. Clarifying expectations. Oh boy. Yeah, misunderstandings are killer.
They really are.
Yeah.
Unclear expectations are just a recipe for frustration, resentment, and definitely withdrawals from the bank account.
Yeah.
If people aren't on the same page about roles, goals, what done, looks like someone's bound to be disappointed.
Like the boss and employee example, one thinks quick report, the other thinks deep dive analysis.
Exactly. That mismatch guarantees friction. It applies everywhere. Work projects, chores at home, like asking your kid to clean their room.
What does clean mean?
Exactly. Spelling it out up front prevents so many problems. It's about making the implicit explicit.
Makes sense. Number 5 is showing personal integrity. This sounds like the absolute core.
It really is the bedrock. Integrity here means being honest, living your values, keeping your commitments consistently. But there's a key aspect highlighted,
Which is?
how you talk about people who aren't there.
Gossip. Backbiting.
Yes, the text argues that doing that is a major withdrawal. Because if you'll speak badly about someone else to me, what's stopping you from speaking badly about me to someone else?
It instantly makes you untrustworthy.
Totally. It undermines the foundation. There's that touching little anecdote, too, the son asking, "Daddy, do you love me?" Just because the dad was reacting negatively about others.
Wow. Kids pick up on that stuff.
They really do. They sense the inconsistency.
Okay, and the final, 6th deposit. Apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal. Gotta own your mistakes.
And the key word there is sincerely. A genuine apology, one that shows you understand the impact of your actions and you're committed to not repeating it, can actually increase the balance.
Oh, so?
It shows humility, accountability. It shows you value the relationship enough to repair the damage. But it has to be real.
Like in the story about the dad yelling at his son, David.
Exactly. Dad snaps at David for banging on the door, finds out David was trying to get help for his injured brother. Dad apologizes, but David's hesitant.
Why?
Because, as the source explains, it wasn't the first time. There had been other impatient outbursts followed by apologies that didn't feel sincere or lead to change. So repeated insincere apologies, they become withdrawals themselves.
Right, they lose all meaning. Okay. There was also this thread woven through about unconditional love. How does that fit in?
Unconditional love acts like a massive foundational deposit. It creates this deep sense of psychological safety, meaning people feel secure enough to be themselves, to make mistakes, to grow, without fearing they'll lose your love or approval. It says, I value you for who you are, not just for what you do or achieve.
And conditional love does the opposite.
It can. Conditional love, where affection or approval depends on meeting certain standards, can create anxiety, pressure, sometimes even rebellion.
Hmm.
People feel they constantly have to earn love.
Like the college president and his son.
Yeah, that story illustrates it well. The president initially pressured his son towards a certain path, his path. But when he shifted to offering unconditional support, just loving his son regardless of his choice, the relationship improved, and ironically, the son eventually chose that path himself, but freely.
That's powerful. The text also mentions the importance of one-on-one relationships, citing Dag Hammarskjöld.
Right, that quote.
Yeah.
Something like, it's harder to give yourself fully to one person than to love all humanity.
Yeah, something like that.
It points to the fact that truly investing in those close individual relationships takes real effort. It's often more demanding than, say, generalized goodwill. It requires vulnerability, consistent work.
Like my own experience, which the source mentions, struggling with my assistant, we had different views.
And how you had to really focus on that one relationship, have the tough conversations, rebuild the trust account.
Exactly. It wasn't easy, but tackling it head on, focusing on our specific dynamic, led to a much stronger partnership. It wasn't about some broad principle, it was about us.
And that connects to another really interesting idea in the text.
Which is
Reframing problems. Seeing relationship issues not just as negatives, but as potential opportunities
opportunities to do what?
to build the emotional bank account even higher. When you navigate a disagreement or solve a problem together with empathy and a focus on understanding, you're making huge deposits.
Oh, so facing challenges constructively strengthens the bond.
Precisely. Like the examples of parents using kids' problems as chances to connect deeply, or that department store that built fierce loyalty by being amazing at fixing customer complaints, they turned a negative into a positive interaction.
Okay, so that covers the trust foundation, the emotional bank account. Let's switch gears now to the second big idea, win-win thinking. The source says this isn't just a tactic, right?
No, not at all. It's presented as much more a fundamental principle for leadership, really a whole philosophy guiding how we interact. It's not just about negotiation, it's a mindset.
Mindset of.
Seeking mutual benefit. Always looking for solutions where everyone involved feels like they've won, like their needs have been met. Seeing life, especially our interactions, as cooperative, not just competitive.
And it's contrasted with, what, 5 other ways people tend to approach things?
That's right, 5 other paradigms. The first is probably the most common, win-lose.
Sounds competitive, like sports.
Exactly. It's the if I win, you lose mentality. I get my way, you don't. The source suggests this often starts early, with comparisons in families, school grading on a curve, competitive sports.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. But in really competitive fields, don't you sometimes need that edge? How does win-win fit there?
That's a fair question. The text argues that even in competitive situations, a purely win-lose approach often breeds resentment and breaks down potential future cooperation. Finding ways for mutual benefit, even small ones, tends to be more sustainable long-term. It doesn't mean being naive, but looking beyond just the immediate win.
Okay. What's next after win-lose?
Then you have lose-win. This is kind of the opposite.
The doormat approach.
Sort of. It's being overly accommodating, putting the other person's needs way ahead of your own, often out of a lack of courage to speak up or a desire to please. They lose, so the other person wins.
But that builds resentment over time, I bet.
Absolutely. It's not sustainable either. Then there's the really unfortunate one, lose-lose.
Sounds bad for everyone.
It is. This often happens when 2 strong win-lose types clash. They get so focused on making sure the other person doesn't win, they end up sabotaging the whole thing, and everybody loses.
Yeah.
It's driven by ego, spite, revenge sometimes.
Grim. Okay, what else?
There's also just win.
How's that different from win-lose?
It's more individualistic.
Uh-huh.
People with a win mentality are just focused on getting what they want. They don't necessarily care if others lose, but they aren't actively trying to make them lose either. They're just self-focused. Others' outcomes are irrelevant.
Got it. And the last one, the alternative.
Win-win or no deal. This one's really powerful.
Tell me more.
It means you go in seeking win-win. You genuinely try to find a solution that works for everyone. But if you honestly explore all the options and you just can't find a truly mutual benefit,
Then what?
then you agree to disagree agreeably. You make no deal, you walk away without forcing a bad compromise that will leave someone feeling resentful later.
That takes maturity, though.
It does. It provides this crucial escape hatch, avoiding those situations where you feel pressured into something that isn't right, which inevitably damages the relationship account later.
And the text really pushes win-win as the only truly viable option long term, especially when people are interdependent.
Yes, for situations where you need ongoing cooperation teams, families, long-term business partnerships, win-lose or lose-win just don't work over time. They break down trust.
Like that chain store president example, he was skeptical at first.
Right. He thought win-win sounded soft, maybe unrealistic. But he realized dealing with suppliers, dealing with customers, if you constantly went for win-lose, eventually they'd go elsewhere or fight back. For sustainable success, he needed them to feel like they were winning too.
So win-win is pragmatic, not just idealistic.
Very much so. But it requires, as the text notes, courage and consideration, speaking up for your needs while respecting theirs.
And that win-win or no deal option seems like a really strong fallback.
It's incredibly freeing. It prevents you from making bad deals out of desperation or pressure. Think about that computer company example.
The one that walked away from a contract?
Yeah, the client's needs changed. The company realized they couldn't deliver a win-win under the new terms, so they said no deal. They were honest. And later, the client came back with an even bigger contract because they respected that integrity.
Wow. That's confidence.
It is. And it applies in personal life too, maybe deciding on a family activity. If you can't find something everyone's genuinely okay with, maybe no deal on that specific thing is better than forcing it.
Although the text does caution no deal might not always fit in really close family ties.
Right. You might need to find other solutions there. But especially in business, particularly family businesses or partnerships with friends, agreeing on win-win or no deal up front, before problems hit, can save a lot of heartache.
Okay, so how do we actually build this win-win capability? The source mentions 5 dimensions. First is character.
Yes, character is the absolute foundation, and it breaks it into 3 key parts: integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality.
Integrity, we touched on that. Living by your values. Being consistent. How do those earlier habits, like being proactive or beginning with the end in mind, feed into this?
Great question. Well, being proactive, taking responsibility for your choices, your life is fundamental to integrity. You can't be reliable if you're blaming circumstances or other people.
Right.
And beginning with the end in mind means defining your values, knowing what you stand for. That clarity is integrity. It's what guides your actions towards win-win, ensuring you're not just saying the words, but living the principle. Without that internal compass and sense of responsibility, win-win efforts will feel hollow.
Okay, second part of character, maturity. Defined here as balancing courage and consideration.
Exactly. Maturity isn't just age. It's this ability to express your own views and needs confidently. That's the courage part, while also genuinely understanding and respecting the other person's perspective. That's consideration.
So not just being tough and not just being nice.
Right. Win-win needs both. Strength and sensitivity. Win-lose often has courage, but lacks consideration. Lose-win has consideration, but lacks courage. Maturity finds the balance.
And the third element of character, the abundance mentality. This feels like a big mindset shift.
It really is. It's believing there's enough for everyone, enough success, enough resources, enough recognition. Life isn't a zero-sum game where someone else's success means less for you.
That's the scarcity mentality, right? The limited pie idea.
Exactly. Scarcity mentality breeds competition, jealousy. Abundance mentality allows you to genuinely be happy for others' wins, to collaborate, to believe that working together can create more success for everyone. Win-win fundamentally requires that belief.
Okay, characters dimension 1, dimension 2 is relationships. This loops back to trust, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Trust that emotional bank account is the essence of win-win relationships. If trust is high, communication's easier, people are more open, more creative, less defensive.
Makes sense. You can't really get to win-win if you don't trust the other person's intentions.
Precisely. A high trust level lubricates the whole process.
Dimension 3, agreements. This is where it gets concrete, right? How you structure things.
Yes. Win-win needs to be formalized in agreements. The text calls them performance agreements or partnership agreements. They shift the focus from top-down supervision to self-supervision and mutual accountability.
From vertical to horizontal relationships.
Exactly. And these agreements need 5 specific elements spelled out clearly.
Okay, what are they?
First, desired results. What outcomes are we aiming for? Clearly defined. Second, guidelines. What are the rules, the principles, the boundaries? Third, resources. What support is available? Human, financial, technical. Fourth, accountability. How will we measure progress and results? And fifth, consequences. What happens, good and bad, based on achieving those results.
That sounds really thorough.
It needs to be to avoid ambiguity. That detailed story about the financial institution's training program is a perfect example.
Where they shifted to trainee control based on results.
Right. They created clear win-win agreements with the trainees. Here are the results you need to demonstrate. Here are the guidelines and resources. You figure out how to do it. Here's how you'll be accountable. And here are the consequences graduating the program.
And the results were dramatic.
Hugely. Trainees took ownership, finished much faster, and the quality was high because the focus was on the outcome, not just following prescribed steps. It shows the power of clear, empowering win-win agreements.
Okay, dimension 4. Systems. You can have the right character and agreements, but the environment matters too.
Critically, win-win thinking can't survive long-term if the surrounding systems in an organization work against it.
Like what kind of systems?
Reward systems are a big one. If you taught collaboration but only reward individual stars who crush the competition, what message does that send? Also, training systems, communication systems, planning, budgeting, they all need to align with and support win-win principles.
The source had those contrasting examples, right? The real estate company.
Yeah, they changed their rewards from celebrating only one top salesperson to recognizing everyone who met their ambitious goals. It fostered more collaboration.
Yeah, and the retail company.
They had managers competing fiercely because their bonuses depended on outperforming other stores. They changed the system, so managers were rewarded partly based on the success of the people they trained, who then became managers elsewhere. Suddenly, cooperation replaced competition. It wasn't a people problem, it was a system problem.
Fascinating. Okay, final dimension, number 5. Processes. How do we actually do win-win in a negotiation or problem-solving situation?
Right, you need a win-win process to get win-win results. The text references Fisher and Urey's work from Getting to Yes and, outlines a 4-step approach.
Okay, step 1.
First, genuinely try to see the problem from the other person's viewpoint. Understand their perspective, their needs, their concerns, as well as, or even better than they do. Empathy first. Identify the key issues and underlying concerns. Don't get stuck on their stated positions. Dig deeper to find out why they hold that position. What need are they trying to meet?
Okay, step 3.
Determine what results would constitute a fully acceptable solution. What would a real win look like for everyone involved? Define the criteria for success together.
And finally, step 4.
Identify possible new options to achieve those results. Brainstorm creatively. Look for solutions that meet the criteria identified in step 3, maybe things neither side initially thought of. It's collaborative problem solving.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to take in. So just to kind of wrap this section up, we've covered building that essential trust with the emotional bank account,
Making those consistent deposits, understanding the individual, keeping commitments.
and then shifting our whole mindset and approach towards win-win thinking, seeing it not just as a tactic, but a philosophy.
Rooted in character integrity, maturity, abundance. Supported by strong relationships, clear agreements, aligned systems, and collaborative processes.
It really drives home that lasting success, in the public victory arena, comes from the inside out, from character, from building real mutually beneficial relationships. It's not just about techniques.
Absolutely. The techniques only work if the foundation is solid. It's about who you are and how you genuinely approach interaction.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Pick one relationship. Just one. Where could you consciously try to apply these ideas? Maybe focus on making specific deposits to that emotional bank account, or really try to approach a recurring issue with a win-win mindset. What difference could that make?
And tied to that, maybe reflect on that abundance versus scarcity idea. How might shifting your own view, believing there really is enough success and happiness to go around and open up new ways of connecting and collaborating with people?
Yeah, powerful questions. And the source material itself ends with some great points for reflection, too. Maybe things you can mull over after this.
Right, like thinking about a specific challenge and how you balance courage and consideration in addressing it.
Or identifying things within your own control, your own influence, that might be barriers to win-win and what you could do about them.
Maybe picking one relationship work or personal and trying to actually craft a win-win agreement, spelling out those 5 elements.
And taking stock of the emotional bank account in maybe 3 key relationships. Where does it stand? What specific deposits could you make this week?
Reflecting on your own default style, are you more win-lose, lose-win? How does that impact your interactions?
And finally, maybe thinking about someone you know who genuinely seems to live by a win-win, a role model. What can you learn just by observing them?
Lots to think about there. It really comes down to being intentional about how we build and maintain our connections with others.
Every topic's got a taste, so like, share, and subscribe now. Your next plate's coming soon.